September 18, 1944. Arnhem was on fire. Rain fell from a dark sky and mixed with smoke and dust. Broken houses lined the streets. Glass crunched under boots. Somewhere in the distance, a city was dying. British paratroopers were pinned down behind stone walls and ruined buildings. Their faces were dirty. Their hands were shaking. They could hear it now. Metal tracks. Slow. Heavy. Unstoppable. A German tank turned the corner, its engine growling like an angry beast. Its machine gun moved left to right, searching. Waiting. The British soldiers froze. They had rifles. They had courage. But against a tank, they had nothing. No anti-tank weapons. No rockets. No escape. Then something strange happened. One man stepped out from cover. He did not run. He did not crawl. He walked. He was not holding a gun. He was not holding a grenade. He was holding an umbrella. Black. Simple. Almost polite. For a moment, even the sound of war felt quieter. In the next few seconds, this umbrella would face a machine built to kill. The man's name was Major Digby Tatum Warder. He looked nothing like a hero from a war poster. He was calm, clean, old-fashioned. His uniform sat neatly on his shoulders. His face showed no fear. Some soldiers stared at him in shock. Others thought he had lost his mind, because this was not the first time they had seen that umbrella. Weeks earlier during training, Digby had become a joke. While other officers packed extra bullets and grenades, Digby packed an umbrella and a bowler hat. The laughter started immediately. One lieutenant laughed and asked, "Sir, are you planning to have tea with the Germans?" Another officer pointed at the umbrella and said, "Is that standard army equipment now?" Even the chaplain smiled and shook his head. Digby only smiled back. "What if it rains?" he said calmly. They called him strange. They called him foolish. Some called him the gentleman soldier. No one believed that umbrella belonged on a battlefield. But Digby did. He was not careless. He was not stupid. He understood something others did not. In battle, chaos destroys order. Radios fail. Smoke hides faces. Soldiers panic. In that confusion, men do not look for rank badges. They look for symbols. Digby knew his men would remember one thing clearly. The man with the umbrella. Now in Arnhem, that symbol stood in the open street. Rain hit the umbrella softly. The tank moved closer. British soldiers held their breath. Someone whispered, "Is he crazy?" The tank's gun barrel pointed toward the ruins. One burst of fire could erase the street. The armor was thick. Bullets would bounce off it like rain. Digby did not stop. He opened the umbrella. Slowly. Calmly. The black fabric spread wide above his head, almost peaceful in the middle of destruction. He took one step forward. Then another. Behind him, soldiers wanted to shout. To pull him back. To scream his name. But no one moved. Because something about the way he walked felt certain. As if he knew something the rest of the world did not. The tank rolled closer. The ground shook. Digby adjusted his grip on the cane handle. His heart was steady. His eyes were focused. The laughter from the training camps was gone now. This was no joke. This was no parade. This was a man walking toward death with an umbrella. The soldiers behind him realized something in that moment. If this man could walk forward, then maybe they could survive. The tank was now only seconds away. The machine gun clicked. Time slowed. Rain fell. Smoke drifted. A black umbrella stood against steel and fire. Everyone thought he was insane. Until the impossible happened. Before Arnhem burned. Before tanks rolled through the streets. There was a simple question every soldier asked. Why did Major Digby Tatum Warder carry an umbrella? The answer did not begin on the battlefield. It began with a weakness. Digby was trained at Sandhurst, one of Britain's best military schools. He was smart, brave, and disciplined. But he had a dangerous problem. He forgot passwords. In World War II, passwords saved lives. At night, a wrong word could get a man shot by his own soldiers. In the dark, fear ruled everything. Digby knew this weakness could kill him, or someone else. So he found a solution. Not a gun. Not a badge. A symbol. Something so strange, so British, so impossible to copy that no German would ever dare use it. An umbrella. When Digby arrived for training with the airborne unit, the reaction was immediate. Men stared. Men laughed. Men whispered. A British paratrooper normally carried over 60 pounds of gear. Bullets. Grenades. Knives. Radios. Digby carried all that. And an umbrella. The jokes never stopped. "Sir, will you need milk with your tea?" "Careful, Major, don't lose that thing in the wind." Even senior officers shook their heads. One commander asked, "Is that standard issue now?" Digby answered politely, "Well, sir, what if it rains?" To everyone else it was nonsense. But Digby understood war was not just about weapons. It was about control. When battle breaks order, men follow calm. And Digby was always calm. During exercises, when explosions shook the ground, Digby stood upright. When others shouted, he spoke softly. When chaos grew, he opened the umbrella and walked. Slowly. The men noticed. Fear eased. Breathing slowed. Order returned. The umbrella became more than a joke. It became a sign. If the man with the umbrella is calm, then things are not lost. Then came the real mission. Operation Market Garden. The plan was bold. Dangerous. Almost impossible. Thousands of paratroopers would drop behind enemy lines in the Netherlands. They would capture bridges and hold them until tanks arrived. Digby's unit had the hardest target. Arnhem Bridge. Intelligence reports promised little resistance. Old men. Teenagers. Weak defenses. Digby did not trust those reports. War rarely goes as planned. On September 17, 1944, Digby boarded the aircraft. Around him, soldiers checked weapons. Some prayed. Some joked to hide fear. Digby adjusted his bowler hat. Hooked the umbrella over his arm. The green light flashed. One by one, men jumped into the sky. Digby stepped out calmly and vanished into the clouds. The drop was quiet. Almost peaceful. He landed west of Arnhem, stood up, brushed dirt from his uniform and opened his umbrella. Not for rain. For direction. He pointed with it. He signaled with it. Men followed it. They moved through fields and villages. Dutch civilians watched silently from windows. The umbrella was still funny. Still strange. But now, it felt right. Then the truth arrived. Gunfire. Explosions. German machine guns. The enemy was not weak. They were elite SS Panzer units, battle-hardened soldiers with tanks and heavy weapons. Arnhem was a trap. Radios failed. Orders stopped. The battalion was alone. As bullets snapped through the air, men dropped into cover. Digby did not. He walked. When a machine gun pinned down a platoon, Digby stepped forward, umbrella raised, and said calmly, "Don't worry, lads. Bullets have no rhythm." It sounded insane. But it worked. Men moved. They attacked. They survived. By nightfall, the umbrella was no longer a joke. It was courage made visible. As darkness fell over Arnhem, Digby's unit reached the edge of the bridge area. They were tired. Low on ammo. Cut off. Then they heard it. A sound every soldier fears. Heavy engines. Metal tracks. Tanks. A young soldier grabbed Digby's arm. "Sir, we have no anti-tank weapons." Digby looked at the street ahead. Then at the umbrella in his hand. He smiled slightly. "We'll manage," he said. In the distance, steel rolled closer. And the umbrella's real test was about to begin. By the evening of September 17, 1944, Arnhem was no longer a city. It was a battlefield. Smoke covered the streets. Fires burned inside broken houses. The sound of gunfire echoed between brick walls like thunder trapped in a box. Major Digby Tatum Warder led his men forward. Not by shouting. Not by running. By walking. The British paratroopers moved through back gardens, narrow alleys, and shattered homes. This was no longer open fighting. This was urban war. Every window was a threat. Every doorway could hide death. German machine guns were everywhere. At 5:15 in the afternoon, the first real stop came. A German machine gun opened fire from a second-floor window. Bullets ripped through brick and dirt. The lead platoon dropped flat to the ground. Men pressed their faces into the mud. No one could move. Anyone who lifted his head would die. Fear spread fast. Digby saw the problem immediately. He stepped forward. Not crawling. Not hiding. Walking. A soldier whispered, "Sir, get down." Digby did not answer. He raised the umbrella and pointed it toward the window like a cane, like a teacher pointing at a blackboard. He spoke calmly, almost politely. "Don't worry," he said. "They have no rhythm." The men thought he was mad. But something strange happened. Seeing their major standing upright under fire broke the spell of fear. Shame pushed the men forward. 2 sections flanked the house. A door was kicked in. Shots rang out. The machine gun went silent. The street belonged to them. As they moved on, the men looked at Digby differently. The umbrella was no longer funny. It was bold. It was fearless. As the sun began to set, reality became clear. They were not pushing through weak defenders. They were walking into a prepared trap. German blocking positions appeared again and again. Every time the British pushed forward, another line stopped them. By nightfall, Digby's company had fought through 3 enemy lines. The men were exhausted, thirsty, low on ammunition. Still they moved. At 8:30 p.m., they reached positions near the northern end of Arnhem Bridge. The steel structure rose above them like a giant shadow. This was the objective. They took cover in nearby houses overlooking the ramp. Windows became firing points. Furniture became barricades. Digby took command near the riverbank. They waited. They waited for reinforcements. They waited for tanks. They waited for orders. Nothing came. The radios were dead. They were alone. Then, in the early hours of the morning, a sound cut through the darkness. A low, deep rumble. Metal on stone. Tracks. Not trucks. Not half-tracks. Tanks. A young private ran to Digby, his face pale. "Sir, there are tanks coming. We can hear them." Digby looked into the dark street. Smoke drifted between the houses. "We have no anti-tank guns," the soldier whispered. Digby looked down at his umbrella. Then back at the man. "We'll make them uncomfortable," he said. The soldier did not understand what that meant. But Digby did. In close streets, tanks were powerful, but blind. Buttoned up. Limited vision. Dependent on fear. Dawn broke on September 18th with explosions. Mortar shells screamed down. Buildings collapsed. Dust filled the air. The British perimeter shrank. They were now 700 men, surrounded by 2 SS Panzer divisions. The Germans held the town. The Germans held the roads. The Germans held the south side of the bridge. The British held a few houses. And 1 umbrella. Digby walked from position to position. No helmet. No hurry. Umbrella in hand. When shells landed nearby, he opened it and smiled. "Good thing I brought this," he joked. The men laughed. Not because it was funny. Because they needed to. Fear kills faster than bullets. Digby knew that. But the Germans also learned something. Infantry attacks were failing. So they changed tactics. Heavy armor was coming. Armored cars. Half-tracks. Steel and fire. Orders were given. Flatten the houses. Crush the defenders. And it. Digby stood in a doorway as engines roared closer. He touched the brim of his hat. Checked his umbrella. Then he turned to his radio operator. "Tell them to hold fire," he said. "Let them come close. Very close." Outside, the first armored vehicle turned into the street. Its engine growled. Its gun searched. And Major Digby Tatum Warder stepped forward. With nothing but an umbrella. The street was narrow. Too narrow for a tank to turn easily. Brick houses pressed in from both sides. Windows were broken. Smoke drifted low like fog. The German armored vehicle moved forward slowly. Its engine growled. Its weight shook the ground. Inside the houses, British soldiers held their breath. Fingers rested on triggers. Sweat ran down dirty faces. They waited for Digby to give the order. But he said nothing. Major Digby Tatum Warder stood in a doorway, half hidden by shadow. The umbrella hung from his belt. The armored vehicle came closer. 50 yards. 40. 30. A soldier whispered, "Sir, please." Digby did not look back. He was watching the tank. He knew something the Germans did not. In open fields, tanks were kings. In narrow streets, tanks were blind. The German driver could barely see ahead. Only a small vision slit showed him the road. Smoke and dust made it worse. Digby waited. If he moved too early, he would be cut down by machine gun fire. If he moved too late, he would be crushed. Timing was everything. The armored vehicle was now less than 10 yards away. The noise was deafening. Hot exhaust filled the air. The ground vibrated under Digby's boots. This was madness. A man with an umbrella against a steel monster. Then Digby moved. He stepped out of the doorway. Not running away. Running toward the vehicle. The German gunner did not see him. The driver was focused straight ahead. Digby moved along the side, staying in the blind spot. In 3 long steps, he reached the vehicle. He grabbed the metal edge and pulled himself up. A British officer climbed onto a German armored car. For 1 frozen second, the world stopped. Then Digby raised the umbrella. With a smooth, practiced motion, he drove the steel tip straight into the driver's vision slit. Inside the vehicle, chaos exploded. The driver screamed. He could not see. The metal rod jammed the slit. Panic took over. The driver slammed the brakes and turned the wheel hard. The armored car swerved violently. Tracks screamed against stone. The vehicle smashed into a brick wall with a terrible crash. The engine stalled. Smoke burst from the front. The machine gun swung wildly but could not find a target. Digby jumped off. He hit the street and rolled, landing cleanly on his feet. Without looking back, he waved his arm. "Now," he shouted. From a second-floor window, a British anti-tank team fired. The round hit the disabled vehicle. A sharp crack. A flash of fire. The armored car burned. The street fell silent. British soldiers stared in disbelief. A tank had been stopped. By an umbrella. Digby straightened his jacket. He examined the umbrella. The tip was bent. The fabric was dirty. Still usable. He looked at his stunned platoon sergeant and said calmly, "Useful things, umbrellas. Keeps the sun out of your eyes." The men laughed. Not from humor. From shock. But there was no time to celebrate. The destroyed vehicle was only the first. From the far end of the bridge came a deeper sound. More engines. More armor. This was the real attack. German commanders had seen enough. Infantry had failed. Now steel would do the job. Armored cars rolled forward. Half-tracks followed. Orders were clear. Crush the defenders. Flatten the houses. Leave nothing standing. Digby moved fast. He repositioned men. Shifted firing points. Kept them hidden. He did not shout. He spoke calmly. "Hold fire. Wait. Closer." The men trusted him now completely. They had seen the impossible. As the next wave approached, Digby stood in the doorway again. Umbrella at his side. Bowler hat slightly tilted. A shell hit nearby. Brick and dust flew into the air. Digby opened the umbrella. Shrapnel bounced off the stones. "Bit noisy tonight," he said. The men smiled through fear. The Germans fired again. Buildings shook. Flames rose. This battle was far from over. The umbrella had won one moment. But the night would demand much more. As darkness closed in over Arnhem, the bridge burned. And Major Digby Tatum Warder prepared his men for a siege that would test the limits of human courage. The night swallowed Arnhem. Fires burned in every direction. Smoke rolled through the streets. The bridge stood above the city like a giant shadow, watching men die below it. Major Digby Tatum Warder and his men were trapped. They had stopped one armored vehicle, but it had changed nothing. Now the Germans were angry. By midnight the shelling began. Mortars screamed from the dark sky and slammed into houses. Walls collapsed. Windows shattered. Dust filled lungs and eyes. British paratroopers huddled in ruined rooms and cellars. Some prayed. Some shook. Some stared into nothing. They had been fighting for hours. They were exhausted. But Digby kept moving. He walked from house to house, stepping over broken glass and bodies. He did not wear a helmet. He carried his umbrella like a walking stick. When a shell exploded nearby, he opened it above his head. "Good thing I brought this," he said calmly. The men laughed. Not because it was funny. Because if they stopped laughing they would break. By dawn on September 18th the truth was clear. 700 British paratroopers were holding a few buildings. 2 full SS Panzer divisions surrounded them. The Germans had tanks. They had artillery. They had supplies. The British had almost nothing. Water was running out. Food was gone. Ammunition was precious. Every bullet had to count. Digby understood something very important. If fear took over, the battle was already lost. So he became more visible. He stood in doorways during shelling. He walked upright under fire. He joked when mortars landed close. "Bit wet today, chaps," he said, opening the umbrella as debris fell around him. Men began to believe something impossible. If this man was not afraid, maybe they did not need to be afraid either. The Germans attacked again and again. Infantry pushed forward, supported by machine guns. British soldiers fired until barrels burned hot. Bodies piled up in the streets. Still, the Germans could not break them. So they changed tactics. On the second day the tanks returned. This time bigger ones. Heavy tanks with thick armor rolled forward, firing shells straight into the houses. Flames burst from windows. Roofs collapsed. One building caught fire with wounded men inside. Digby ran toward it without hesitation. He organized the evacuation under fire. He helped carry wounded soldiers out, smoke burning his eyes. A young soldier cried, "Sir, the building is coming down." Digby nodded. "Yes," he said calmly. "So let's be quick." By afternoon, the British position had shrunk again. The bridge ramp was all that remained. The men had not slept in nearly 3 days. Their hands shook from exhaustion. Their mouths were dry. Their faces were hollow. The Germans saw weakness. They prepared one final push. Infantry gathered in the gardens. Tanks moved into position. Orders were clear. And Digby saw them forming. He knew rifle fire alone would not stop them. He looked at his men. Dirty, bleeding, tired, still standing. He picked up a bowler hat from a ruined house and placed it on his head. It sat too high. It looked ridiculous. He raised his revolver in one hand, the umbrella in the other. Right, he said loudly. Let's show them how the airborne does it. He paused. Fix bayonets. The sound was electric. Metal clicked onto rifle barrels. Fear turned into something else. Anger. Pride. Defiance. Digby stepped forward. He blew a whistle. And charged. 30 paratroopers followed him. They leapt over walls and rushed into smoke and fire. A man in a bowler hat and umbrella led the charge, shouting into the chaos. The Germans froze. They expected surrender. They expected broken men. They did not expect a bayonet charge led by a man who looked like he was late for work. The shock broke the German line. Hand-to-hand fighting exploded. Rifles became clubs. Knives flashed. Men screamed. Digby fired his revolver. He hooked a German soldier's legs with the umbrella and sent him crashing to the ground. Against logic. Against reason. The British pushed them back. The line held. For now. But courage could not stop time. By the morning of September 20th, the situation was hopeless. Buildings burned. Wounded filled cellars. Ammunition was almost gone. Colonel Frost was badly wounded. Digby took command of what remained. He organized the defense calmly, even as the walls fell around them. The end was coming. The umbrella was still standing. But the fire was not done yet. Morning came quietly. Too quietly. Arnhem was no longer a battlefield of noise and fire. It was a city of ruins. Smoke hung in the air like a heavy curtain. The bridge stood scarred and blackened, surrounded by broken buildings and burned vehicles. Major Digby Tatum Warder stood near a shattered wall. He was tired. Not just tired in the body, but tired in the bones. His jacket was torn. His face was black with soot. His umbrella was cracked, the tip bent beyond repair. Around him, what remained of the British force waited. Some sat against walls, staring at nothing. Some lay wounded, unable to move. Some quietly prepared for a last stand. There was almost no ammunition left. One rifle had 3 bullets. Another had 1. Some had none at all. Digby walked among them. He spoke softly. You did well, he told them. Very well. A young soldier looked up at him. Sir, is this it? Digby paused. He looked at the bridge. Then at the men. Yes, he said honestly. I believe it is. There was no panic. No shouting. Only silence. The Germans approached carefully this time. Infantry moved forward slowly, weapons ready. Tanks followed at a distance, guns aimed. A loudspeaker crackled. A German officer shouted in English. British soldiers, you are surrounded. You have fought bravely. Lay down your weapons. Digby removed his bowler hat. He wiped the dust from it. Then he placed it back on his head. He turned to his men. No one here has failed, he said. We held longer than anyone thought possible. He raised his voice slightly. If you can escape, do so now. If not, stand tall. Some men tried to move through the ruins. Most could not. The Germans were everywhere. Digby stepped forward. He raised the umbrella. Not as a weapon. As a sign. The firing stopped. German soldiers advanced cautiously. They stared at him with confusion. A British officer wearing a bowler hat, holding an umbrella, standing calmly among ruins, it did not make sense. A German captain approached. He looked Digby up and down. You are the one with the umbrella, he said. Digby nodded. So I am. The captain shook his head slowly. I thought you were a myth. Digby smiled faintly. I assure you I am quite real. The Germans collected the weapons. The British soldiers were searched and escorted away. Digby was taken last. As he walked, a German soldier pointed at the umbrella and laughed. Digby looked at it. Yes, he said. It's seen better days. They marched the prisoners through the streets of Arnhem. Civilians watched silently from broken windows. Some cried. Some nodded with respect. The bridge faded behind them. The battle was over. The war was not. Prison camp. Digby was sent to a prisoner of war camp in Germany. Barbed wire surrounded wooden huts. Guards with rifles stood at every corner. Searchlights swept the ground at night. The Germans believed the danger was over. They were wrong. From the first day Digby began to plan. He studied guard movements. Counted steps. Noted shadows. Other prisoners watched him. One whispered, Sir, surely you're not thinking of escaping? Digby adjusted his hat. Of course I am. He organized secret meetings. passed messages quietly, used humor to hide intent. When guards searched the camp, Digby carried the umbrella openly. No one suspected it. It was just an umbrella. Weeks later the escape began. Prisoners crawled through a tunnel at night. One by one they disappeared into the forest. Digby was near the end. As he moved, a guard shouted. Lights flashed. Sirens screamed. The escape was discovered. Gunfire cracked the night. Digby ran. He used the umbrella to push wire aside, to balance as he climbed, to block a dog for one brief second. He almost made it. Almost. A rifle but struck his shoulder. He fell hard to the ground. Boots surrounded him. The attempt failed. He was dragged back into the camp. A German officer stood over him. Why? The officer asked angrily. You are a respected prisoner. You are treated well. Digby looked up calmly. Because, he said, escaping is my duty. The officer stared at him for a long moment. Then he turned away. Digby was punished. Isolated. Watched closely. But his spirit did not break. Not even close. As he lay on a wooden bunk that night, he smiled faintly. The umbrella rested beside him. Still there. Still defiant. Major Digby Tatum Warder sat quietly in the camp. The guards thought him broken. They thought the man with the umbrella had been defeated. But Digby was planning. Always planning. He learned the routines. The guard shifts. The blind spots in the barbed wire. Days passed. Weeks passed. He waited. Patient. Calm. Like always. Then one night he acted. He slipped out of his hut. The guards were distracted. The dogs were elsewhere. He moved silently through the shadows. The umbrella? Left behind. No need for it now. He climbed a fence. He crawled through a ditch. He ran across open fields, guided by the stars. He found Dutch resistance fighters. They gave him clothes, food, and a new identity, Peter Jansen. Now invisible, Digby gathered the scattered British soldiers left behind after Arnhem. Some were hiding in forests. Some were injured. Some were lost. He organized them. Armed them with what little weapons they could find. Led them to safety. They crossed the Rhine River at night. 138 men. All alive. This became Operation Pegasus. The largest Allied escape of the war. And it was led by a man with a bowler hat, and, earlier, an umbrella. When the war ended, Digby returned home. He received the Distinguished Service Order. A medal for bravery. But he never spoke much of the umbrella. Never boasted of disabling a tank with a piece of silk and wood. He moved to Kenya. Bought a farm. Lived quietly, away from mortars, smoke, and chaos. Yet those who knew him never forgot. They remembered the calm officer. The man who walked into fire, rain, and death. With a bowler hat on his head and an umbrella in his hand. A man who proved that courage could be quiet. And style could be deadly. In history books, his actions were noted. But in real life he became a legend. Hollywood even tried to tell the story. They cut the umbrella from the film. They could not believe it. They thought it was too strange, too absurd. Too true. But truth is often stranger than fiction. Digby Tatum Warder died in 1993. He was 75. The umbrella is gone now. The bowler hat is gone. But the lesson remains. Courage is not measured by weapons. Not by numbers. Not by strength alone. It is measured by spirit. By calm in the storm. By daring the impossible. The streets of Arnhem are silent today. But in the minds of those who fought, and in the hearts of those who remember, Major Digby Tatum Warder lives on. The man who stopped a tank with an umbrella. The man who led men out of death. The man who laughed at fear. Final line for suspense and inspiration. Sometimes the most powerful weapon in war is the courage of one man who refuses to surrender.